Hello YouTube, Dave here again. So recently, as the pandemic situation has continued to progress or evolve or continue on, whatever you want to refer to it as, I've found the last few months I've been just pulling the trigger on purchasing some things and trying to just build some collections of things that ordinarily I probably wouldn't have gotten into. And nothing exemplifies that more than my first edition Pathfinder collection. A couple of years ago, I made a video discussing why I wasn't interested in collecting first edition Pathfinder or really discussing or doing videos on it. At the time, it was just too similar to D&D 3.5, which to this day, I still just feel really burned out on, having run it between it and 3.0 every week for 12 years straight. It just left me with sort of this lack of desire to get into it. So for the longest time, the book that you see in front of you was really it in terms of my Pathfinder first edition collection. I actually ended up buying this core rule book not to use it myself, but because not to use it myself as a game master to run games with, but because a friend of mine was suggesting or offering to run a Pathfinder game once I wrapped up the last 3rd edition 3.5 campaign that I was running. This was back in 2012, late 2011, early 2012, I think is when when I ended up picking this up. And I honestly have never really spent a lot of time reading through it. But that sort of changed in the last little bit for a few reasons. And I always felt like once I started getting into 2nd edition Pathfinder or even starting with Starfinder, I always felt a little bit of guilt for not really looking at Pathfinder first edition at all. And I decided that there were a few things that I was interested in, and it sort of snowballed from there. So in this video, what I want to do is actually show off the entirety of my first edition Pathfinder collection. Now, I'm not going to show the flip mats that I have, like the classic flip mats, because technically they're sort of releasing during the 2nd edition Pathfinder era, and I just recently did a video showing all the flip mats in my collection. But with this one, I'm just going to talk about all the first edition Pathfinder stuff that I have here. So first of all, we have the Pathfinder core rulebook, which is the player's book and the game master's guide all rolled into one, and it is actually pretty awesome. I will say that this is, if you're interested in 3rd edition D&D or you're considering getting into 1st edition D&D, I would honestly recommend going with Pathfinder instead. Because Pathfinder it's a lot of times it gets referred to as 3.75, and it really takes the 3.5 game and really improves on it in pretty much every way. The things that I was dissatisfied with or burnt out on being a part of 3.5 D&D, like spell resistance and damage reduction, have workarounds in the Pathfinder system that are in line with a house rule that I ended up making before I even bought the core rulebook. So it's just kind of interesting to see that they did actually address some of those issues. So I'm not going to say never say never, but I'm more likely to want to run 1st edition Pathfinder than 3.5 D&D. But this is an awesome system. It's an awesome book, and I've really been enjoying going back and starting to look through it for the first time really in 8 years. So since I had this. But this is the core rulebook. That's the one that started it all for me. The next item is actually something else that I've had for a long time. This is the Pathfinder Pawns NPC Codex Box. So this is a pawn collection, and the pawns, for those who aren't aware, the pawns are these cardboard stand-ups, and I love them. I absolutely love them. I wish I had more in my collection, and I think one of the next big purchases that I'm going to try to go after is going to be the 2nd edition Bestiary pawns collection. But these are a much cheaper, much more affordable way to collect, to build up a collection of minis. If you don't want to spend the money for the plastic ones, or you don't have the money for the plastic ones, you can spend significantly less and get a ton of stuff here. So the NPC Codex Box has Just a ton, like 20 pawns each for the core classes from the core rulebook. So barbarians, bards, clerics, druids, fighters, monks, paladins, rangers, rogues, sorcerers, and wizards. It also has a ton of prestige classes. So pawns that represent those. We have pawns that represent NPC classes like the acolyte, like the noble, like the commoner, stuff like that. They have those in there. They have the iconic characters from the core rulebook, which is pretty cool. And then they have a bunch of animal companions. So this is actually a really great pickup. I never really got around to using it in a game because around the time that I got this is the time that I ended up moving away. And it was sort of a year or more before I got back into really reliably being able to run RPGs. But these pawn collections are awesome. And this was the first one I ever owned. Way back in like 2000, it was like late 2011 or early 2012 and I ended up picking this up. I don't have the book that goes with it yet, so that's something that is sort of on the radar, though I may not necessarily go out of my way to try to get it, but it would be nice to have that just to complete the set. Up next is something else I've actually shown off in a few videos in the last month or so. This is the Pathfinder beginner box for first edition Pathfinder. The beginner boxes, Paizo does an amazing job with these, and I kind of wish I had a second one that I could have and have sealed, but the store that I was able to get these from, their inventory ran out. I think it was right after I bought this one. Like, I think it said they had 3 left in stock, so I pulled the trigger on 1, and then by the time I had a little bit of extra money to try to go back and get a second one, it was gone. But at the same time, where this is sort of an older product, I would rather someone buy it that would open it up and enjoy it. So as much as I like to have like sealed collections of some of these like box sets, I'm not going to go out of my way to try to get another one of these because they are out of print, and like I said, there's other people that would want these and appreciate them, so it's totally fine. But these things are amazing. I absolutely love them. They are a great resource for people that are starting to like just get into RPGs. It gives you a great range of options in terms of either using just pre-made characters right out of the box or being able to make your own characters. And for the Game Master, it gives you a really great starting adventure that usually leaves itself open for further, like to branch out into further adventures. And they give you like a map to work with for a second one, but it really also steers you towards designing and creating your own adventures, which I think a good starter set should try to do, is give you the tools and give you what you need to design your own games and get comfortable doing it. So up next is something that I honestly didn't think I was really ever going to be able to find. And I was really surprised that it was available, so I snatched it up right away. But that is a copy of the first edition Pathfinder Game Master screen. So at this point in time, I will probably keep this sealed because I don't see running a first edition Pathfinder game anytime soon. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not going to completely rule it out. But right now, it's just something that's probably not going to happen for a while. But I do love Game Master screens, and this one looks pretty cool. On the front, it just has like the iconic characters from the core rulebook, and then on the other side, you just sort of have your charts, which will probably be like typical things like hardness and breaking DCs for objects, probably some skill charts, maybe some things along those lines. So I don't know exactly what's on the inside of it, but like I said, there may be a point in the future where I do open it up and do a video for it, but for now, I'm just going to keep it as is. But I was just happy to be able to find it because, I don't know for sure that it's out of print, but, this is something that I never even knew was available through the bookstore that I was ordering stuff from. They ended up giving me this discount code for my birthday back in May, and I just did a search for Pathfinder, and interestingly enough, this was one of the things that loaded, and I'd never seen it on their site before, so I don't know if they just got a fresh stock of the shipment of them in or whatnot, but I decided to pick this up. immediately. So I'm glad to add that to my collection. All right, up next are the products that really kickstarted my interest in going back and collecting for first edition Pathfinder. So these are the Pathfinder Pocket Edition books that I have in my collection. So a lot of these are going to be shown in this pickup video that I've been recording over the course of the last 2.5 months. But that one I'd probably save for a week or two after this comes out anyway. So, you know, hopefully there'll be enough distance that it won't feel too samey. But I've got lots of other stuff in that pickup video as well. Some of these are books that I've already actually shown in previous videos. Initially I started picking these up because I wanted to do my Through the Ages videos, which I will be getting back into hopefully very, very soon. So the first one here is the Advanced Player's Guide. So I actually used to have this as a hardcover, but shortly after we moved to Dartmouth, I ended up trading it into my local game store because I didn't think I was ever going to use it, and I wanted it to go to a home for someone, like to someone that would appreciate it. I have a pretty good idea who it was that bought it from the store, so it did go to a good home. But interestingly enough, you know, a couple years later, I find that it was something that I now feel like I'm sort of missing, and there was stuff in there that would help me with some other videos, so I decided to pick this one up. There was a bit of a snafu with it though, because I had a few of the pocket editions in my cart initially when I went to order them, but I only had money for 2 out of the 3 at the time. Oddly enough, if I had just waited like an extra day, I would have had enough for all of them. But actually, so I went to take one of them out of the cart, and this was the one that got taken out. It wasn't the one I meant to click on, but it was like late at night, and I was tired and not fully aware of what I was doing, so I had to reorder this. But anyway, it's totally fine now because I have it, and like so a lot of people sort of point to this as the book that really started kickstarting Pathfinder's identity, like setting it apart from just being another 3.5 OGL product and really starting to really make it feel like its own game with the options and stuff that were in here. And I'm inclined to agree with that. This was a great book. I actually loved it back in the day, but I just didn't think I was going to use it. But now I know that I will, and I've got the pocket edition. And these pocket editions are great because they are about half the price of a hardcover. And a lot of these hardcovers are very difficult to find. Some of them are very expensive to try to get, and some of them you just can't really find. So this is one that I'm really happy to have back in my collection and in these awesome pocket edition forms. I'm honestly still considering getting the core rulebook in a pocket edition, and maybe offering this core rulebook to a friend of mine that's getting into like Pathfinder 2nd edition, just to give them that sort of sense of history for it. But anyway, so the Advanced Player's Guide was the first one there. Up next is actually one that is one of the most recent ones that I've added to my collection. And this is one that I picked up from my local game store when they were finally able to reopen after like 2 months of being closed down. So this is the Advanced Race Guide. So this just gives you a whole host of new player character races to play, like goblins, drow, stuff that feels more common now, but this gives you a whole bunch of new races to play, some new options for the races from the core rulebook. And this was just one that I was really, again, I didn't think I was going to be able to pick this one up because when the store that I had been ordering stuff from, this was listed as out of stock or ships within 3 to 5 weeks, but it's been saying that for 2 months. So when I went to my local game store and looked around, they had this in stock, and they've had it for a while, but I never really looked at the pocket editions back then. Glad I did now though, because this one is just, you know, this was one that I really wanted to get, and I'm glad that I have it. And then up next we have, after the Advanced Race Guide, we have the Advanced Class Guide. This was the one that I accidentally left in my cart when I meant to delete it. But if you take a look, I mean, late at night, you see like 2 green dragon type, you know, creatures on the covers, you know, 2 situations with 2 characters fighting them off. I'm going to say it's an easy enough mistake to make when you're sleep deprived and you know, maybe shouldn't be making decisions at the time that I was doing it. But anyway, that's actually also a really great book, and one that's really useful for the history of the different RPG classes videos that I started and hope to be continuing again soon. Up next, we have the Game Mastery Guide. So this book is fantastic. There's a lot of great stuff in here that I think is still really prevalent and usable today. There's a lot of advice on designing adventures, encounters, things along those lines, different ways, different approaches to running games. It's just, I think, an overall very solid book. You know, and I wanted to get this because a lot of people mentioned it, you know, in terms of like comparing it to the second edition Game Mastery Guide. And in my opinion, they're both as good as one another. Like, I think that they're both awesome books, and I think that if you're playing either edition, then these are excellent pickups to make. At the time that I went to get this one, there was only one marked as in stock, so I kind of had to pull the trigger on it like as soon as I did, and that's when I got that at the same time as the advanced class guide. But this is an absolutely awesome book and a great read even today even if you're not running first edition Pathfinder. Along those same lines is also another book that I picked up from my local game store after they reopened, and that is Ultimate Campaign. Now this one, I think even more so, is still usable with newer systems or other RPG rules. There's just a lot of great charts. There's a lot of great ways of designing like mass battle systems, designing like settlements. There's a lot of great stuff that I've sort of skimmed through on this book so far. I haven't had a chance to really sit down and comprehensively read through it, but what I've seen so far is just absolutely awesome. And I have to say, I love the cover of, you know, like the armies clashing with the arrows flying, and it just, I don't know, this was one that was also through like the major bookstore that I was getting stuff from initially, that was marked as like ships within 3 to 5 weeks, and has been saying that forever. So this was another one of those books that I didn't think I was ever going to be able to find. But they had it at my local store, so I was able to help support them upon their reopening and get a book that I was really, really excited about. All right, so these next 4 books that I'm going to be showing were actually sent to me by a viewer. And I do mention this in the pickup video because I recorded that segment a couple weeks before starting this video here. But this was sent to me by Chris. The username is XRIS. I really want to thank him for sending this. He sent it all the way from the United Kingdom. Now these pocket edition books usually go for Canadian for $25 to $26. So he sent me 4 of these, which is around $100 value. But he only paid £3, I think he said, per book, which translates to roughly $5 a book. So for less than the price of one book, he was able to get these 4, and he offered to send them to me, and I just really, it really means a lot, and I really appreciate the fact that he would do that and offer to do that. He has the hardcovers already, so these were ones that he just picked up because the deal was so good, and I can't blame him. I would do the exact same thing. So we're going to start off here with Ultimate Wilderness. So this is one I've been leaning more towards designing wilderness type of adventures and encounters and scenarios lately. Where I've been doing like online gaming, I don't want to get into like big long dungeon crawls. So a lot of the stuff that I've been designing is like wilderness based. So I think even though I'm not running first edition Pathfinder, I think there's going to be a lot of useful stuff in here that I can adapt for the systems that I am running. So this is a really, really awesome book. This was one of the ones that was actually on the wish list that I had set up with the major bookstore that I was dealing with. So he offered to send it to me, so I was able to get it from him. But yeah, this is one that I'm really looking forward to going through. He also sent Occult Adventures, which was another one that I was interested in. So it was nice to have that one sent as well. This one, I haven't had too much of a chance to look through it as of yet. Like, even though this was shipped out in mid-April, it didn't arrive until early June. I think it was like the last weekend of May or early June, and you know, there's been some stuff going on, I guess, just in terms of trying to get, you know, things back to some semblance of normalcy, dealing with some other things. But this is one that I will be looking through over the next week or so. I just haven't had a chance to really look through it too much yet. But it looks like it sort of has like psychic characters in it, which I think is going to be awesome. So kind of like your quasi psionic system, but this is one again that I was really looking forward to. Then we've got the Monster Codex. And now this book is awesome. So what this is, I'll probably do more comprehensive reviews for some of these later on, so I don't want to get too much into it right now. But this is essentially a monster book that focuses on a narrow range of creatures, but you still get a lot of stuff in here. There's goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears. I think there's like gnolls, trolls, vampires, ogres, some of the giants. But instead of like having a huge collection of monsters, it has a narrow focus, but several versions or variants of all of those different types of creatures. So you can really build sort of more interesting encounters using some of the creatures that are in here. So this was super high on my list of books to get. And when he said this was one of the ones that he had, I was really just kind of getting blown away by it. And you know, I mean, I can't thank him enough for sending these. But this is one that was on like the top of my wish list of books to get, and just so happened to be one of the ones that he ended up finding for, well, basically next to nothing. I wish stores in my area would have those kinds of sales, because I would be all over that. But again, thank you very much, Chris, for sending that. And then the last one is sort of similar to the last book. This is the Villain Codex. This is one that I also haven't really had a chance to look through too much. But I think this is sort of all about just building and designing villainous NPCs, as well as different like categories, like different cults, different types of organizations, and having things statted out for that as well. So again, another fantastic book to have. All right, up next, believe it or not, is the book that triggered my obsession. And I'm not going to pretend that it's not an obsession, because it certainly is. But that triggered my obsession with collecting these pocket edition books. This is the Pathfinder Adventure Path, Rise of the Rune Lords. Now, I do want to do a video dedicated just to this book in the future, so I'm not going to go too much into this right now. But this is the very first adventure path that was ever done under the Pathfinder brand. For a little bit of backstory, Paizo Publishing, the company that produces Pathfinder, was, before this, they were publishing Dragon Magazine, and they were publishing Dungeon Magazine. And in Dungeon Magazine, they started doing adventure paths. I actually have a video series where I'm just going through and sort of reviewing and doing summaries of the installments in their very first D&D adventure path, the Shackled City path. And those elements of the Dungeon Magazine became so popular that it's sort of what propelled them, and I think gave them the boost that they needed to sort of separate once Wizards made the decision to cease the physical publication and to take the contract back and start producing it in-house again. Like, in my opinion, Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, like when it moved to the online thing, I don't think it was ever really the same. And now Dragon Plus is an absolute like shell of its former glory. But when they ended the physical magazine, Paizo still had subscribers. They still had people with like a year-long subscription that had been renewed shortly before Wizards made the decision to end the magazines. So with that in mind, they decided to just create their own stuff. The initial Pathfinder products, including the Rise of the Rune Lords Adventure Path, was actually originally fully compatible and designed for 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. Several of their early Pathfinder books were also released for 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't until 2009 that the Pathfinder core rulebook was initially released in the first place, and the magazine got discontinued in 2007. So there was actually a pretty lengthy period. I think it was like a year and a half to 2 years from the time that the magazine ended to the time that the core rulebook came out. But in the meantime, they were releasing adventure paths and some hardcover books and developing their own settings. And Rise of the Rune Lords, I mean, I've only read through the first 3 chapters of it so far. There's 6 installments in total. This combines all the 6 individual adventures into one, and this is the anniversary edition, so it was updated for the finalized Pathfinder first edition rule set. So this, like, the things that were changed between 3.5 and Pathfinder were updated for this book. But I will say that even the very first adventure in here, which is Burnt Offerings, I was really kind of surprised by the tone of the writing and some of the language that was used in the books, because it's just something that I don't think you would probably see today. And it's interesting to see like how things have changed over the years. But so far it's shaping up to be a really amazing campaign, and something that I'm considering either running straight as a first edition Pathfinder game or updating it for Pathfinder second edition. But one way or the other, I want to run this adventure path. This came out right after the Savage Tide adventure path in Dungeon Magazine, and the Pathfinder adventure path products I think are great in general, but I think they were really sort of on point and sort of at I don't want to say their peak, because obviously that's not true, but they had a very solid grasp of how to make an engaging adventure path, and this is the one that started it for the Pathfinder game. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to reading through the rest of the chapters, but so far it's been just an awesome read. And when this came out, this was the book that triggered me into wanting to actually collect some of the Pathfinder first edition stuff, because you see, references creatures in the Bestiary. Well, I didn't have that. So it's like, okay, well, I want to get this because I really want this book. So it might be nice to have some of the other books to go along with it. And it just sort of snowballed from there. But this is an absolutely amazing, awesome adventure path. This is a pretty relatively recent release in terms of this pocket edition as well. So it should be pretty easy to pick up, even if you aren't necessarily interested in first edition Pathfinder. I think you should still pick this up, and because it's an awesome story, awesome series of adventures, and it's worth owning. And along those lines, this just came out within the last few days of me recording this video. But this is the second adventure path, or I think it's the second adventure path, because I think it says it was books number 7 through 12, if I recall. I think I saw it. It may not be on the actual, in this part of the book here. It might be in the introduction. But this is the Curse of the Crimson Throne. Now, a while back, Paizo sent me the review copies of the adventure card game system that they re-released, that they revised, and the expansion that they had for it was the Curse of the Crimson Throne. So when I saw inside of this book that the next pocket edition coming out for Pathfinder was going to be the Curse of the Crimson Throne, I was super excited for it. It did get delayed due to the global pandemic and everything, but it is out, and I've only read the first very, very little bit, but this also looks like it is going to be an absolute blast to read through, and is another adventure path that I see myself wanting to run. So this is brand new. So it's something that I will say right now, before I even do a review video on it, I think that this is something that people should be getting, because it is just that awesome. And finally, to round out my Pathfinder first edition collection, I have the Bestiary books. Actually, I have all 6 Bestiary books for Pathfinder First Edition, all in pocket edition form. So I definitely went a little overboard with Pathfinder First Edition stuff, but I don't know. I really just got into these pocket editions. I absolutely love them, and it's like I said, it was a chance to go back and to fill that gap in the collection. So with the Bestiary. The Bestiary 1 and the Bestiary 2 here, I picked these both up at the same time. The main reason for it was I thought it might be fun to sort of compare some of the things in the Bestiary 1 from 1st and 2nd edition Pathfinder and some of the things from the Bestiary 2 in 1st and 2nd edition Pathfinder. And for a while, I was actually content to leave it there. However, that obviously didn't quite hold up. Because the next one I actually ended up getting was the Bestiary 5, which I have right here. And the reason that I ended up picking up the Bestiary 5, I actually ordered this at the same time I got my Game Master screen. And the bookstore that I was getting it from had free shipping for orders over $35. With the regular shipping price that I would have paid, because the screen itself was obviously less than that, was around $19 to $20. I think it was a little over $20 actually for shipping. So I was only a few dollars away from getting the free shipping, and the Bestiary was actually cheaper to pick up than the shipping price would have been, because I think it was like I said, I think it was about $20 for shipping, and it was only $17 for this one because this one was actually on sale. It was discounted quite a bit, which was pretty cool. So I ended up getting this with the Game Master screen. The problem with that, though, is that I now had Bestiary 1, 2, and 5, and I didn't like the way that felt. There's just sort of this gap that was left in the collection, which is something that I am very probably overly obsessive with, and I admit it's probably a problem. So I ended up having to sort of fill the gap there. There was another offer from Chapters where if you spent, I think it was if you spent $50 or more in a single order, they would give you $10 off worth of points for a future purchase. So with that in mind, I picked up the Bestiary 3, and then I also ordered the Bestiary 4, and the Bestiary 4 is pretty awesome because it has a bunch of Lovecraftian stuff in it. I mean, you actually have Cthulhu literally on the cover, and I really wish I would have seen this book. Like I wasn't paying attention to Pathfinder stuff at the time, but if I would have known that there was a Pathfinder First Edition Bestiary out there with Cthulhu and some of the other great old ones, Clara Space I think is also in this one, I would have picked that up immediately. I wasn't aware, I wasn't following, but I have corrected that. And there's some great undead creatures here in the Pathfinder Bestiary 3, which includes, I think, like the Hukiva, I want to say, is in here, which is actually one of my favorite undead creatures, and the Grave Knight and stuff like that are in here. So that's really, really awesome stuff. But because I was placing this order, and I had Bestiaries 3, 4, I already owned 5, and I had 1 and 2, I was only missing one more book, so I decided to just bite the bullet and get the Bestiary 6 along with that. So all 3 of these came in at the same time, and essentially I'm going to get $10 off something in the future, so I've got those points saved up. So it was well worth it. Bestiary 6 actually looks really awesome because it has some like Archdevils, and I think there's Demon Lords in here as well. I only really looked at the Archdevil so far, but I'm actually really impressed with each of these bestiaries. I know with some other systems, some other editions of other games, it can be difficult for subsequent, for every monster book to really be necessarily, decent. Looking at, like, say, 3rd edition D&D, the Monster Manual 2 and 3 were both pretty lacking, in my opinion. But all these bestiaries just seem so awesome, and I'm really enjoying looking through all these. And again, it's just something that I really do kind of regret that I hadn't paid attention to the Pathfinder stuff in the past, because like I said, I think that this is all just super great quality stuff. And Paizo is a company that I always admired, and it was a company that I always really enjoyed their work in the past, but it's just one of those things that I ended up just kind of drifting away from them. And now I've got the chance to go back and change that. So I think overall I managed to build up a pretty decent Pathfinder first edition collection. I'm pretty happy with everything that I have. There are a couple of other books that I would like to get, but I'm not going to go out of my way for. If I can find them, then great. If I don't, then I don't. But I'm really enjoying going back and collecting for first edition. So you never know. There may be some more of these that I do in the future. Especially if they keep releasing the adventure paths like the Curse of the Crimson Throne or the Rise of the Rune Lords. I don't know how many of those were actually done as hardcovers back in the day, but I would be more than happy to keep getting those. Obviously, Pathfinder Unchained, if they ever release that as a pocket edition, I will be picking that up day one as well. So that is my Pathfinder first edition collection. Those are all the products that I have, from GM screens to beginner boxes, the one hardcover book that I have in my collection, which I really am still sort of on the fence about giving it the hardcover to a friend of mine who might be interested in it, and getting the pocket edition just for symmetry purposes. We'll see. Time will tell on that one. I might just get the pocket edition because I have a problem. But anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what are some of your favorite first edition Pathfinder books. And, there may be some that obviously I didn't have access to in this video that might be worth looking into in the future. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.